The emergency meeting had barely begun when Prince William placed a sealed financial file in the center of the table. No speech, no warning. Just a single account number, a trail of unexplained payments, and a private spending fund connected directly to Queen Camilla. King Charles stared at the first page in silence. Then William spoke 7 words that changed the atmosphere inside the palace. This account was never meant to exist. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William kept one hand on the file, while Camilla watched him with cold disbelief. Princess Anne sat opposite them, silent, her eyes moving between the figures and the faces around the table. 2 financial officials had been summoned after a confidential review uncovered payments moving outside the household approval system. That system was the process used to check, authorize, and record royal spending before money left palace-controlled accounts. The prince had spent days examining expenditure records, comparing dates, codes, and approvals. He found travel, furnishings, advisors, dinners, and gifts charged through a concealed palace reserve. Camilla insisted the fund was authorized. She accused him of turning a financial question into a family humiliation. Charles opened the file and read the first page. He removed his glasses, placed them beside the document, and looked at his wife without speaking. The king's silence struck harder than anger. Camilla expected resistance from William, but she had counted on her husband to defend her. When he did not, her certainty began to break. William turned the file toward his father and tapped one transfer. "Your signature is not on this because nobody intended you to read it." The future king then pointed to an authorization code on the payment. It belonged to him, yet he had never approved the transaction. Someone inside the Queen Consort's office had used his authority to make the transfer appear legitimate. Anne leaned forward when she saw an entry marked Windsor Renewal Initiative. The title suggested money intended for maintaining a royal residence, but the destination was a property linked to one of Camilla's associates. The princess asked the officials to confirm the address. Their answer drained the last warmth from the room. William reached for a second document. He warned Charles that the account was not the darkest discovery. This page showed how the payments had been divided, hidden, and kept away from the monarch's briefings. Worse, it named the person who helped conceal them. As Charles reached for the second document, the meeting stopped being an inquiry and became a struggle over loyalty, marriage, and the future control of the crown. For William, this was not simply about money. For Camilla, it was not merely about reputation. And for Charles, it was far more painful than a palace scandal. 3 people sat inside the same room, carrying 3 different fears. A future king determined to protect the monarchy. A queen terrified of losing everything she had fought to gain. And a husband forced to decide whether love had blinded him to betrayal. William understood what the hidden account could do to the institution he would one day inherit. The monarchy depended on public trust, and every secret payment threatened to place Catherine and their children beneath a cloud they had not created. The prince had spent years preparing for responsibility. Now that responsibility had arrived in the cruelest possible form. Camilla carried a different wound. Years of judgment had taught her to guard her title, her household, and every advisor who remained loyal to her. She had fought too long to be accepted as Queen Consort, the formal title given to the wife of a reigning king, to allow William to treat her office as something temporary or disposable. The future king remembered a private conversation with Queen Elizabeth II. During that documented family meeting, the late monarch had warned him that personal loyalty could never stand above public duty. The memory returned with painful force. This was no longer an argument between relatives. It was a test of whether he was ready to protect the crown, even when the truth wounded his own father. Camilla leaned toward him, her voice controlled but bitter. "I stood beside you when others called you impatient." She reminded William that she had defended him during tense disagreements with Charles. The Queen believed that support should have earned her a private warning, not exposure before Anne and the financial officials. Princess Anne broke the silence. She told Charles that the payments began shortly after Camilla gained greater influence over household appointments. Those appointments decided who managed offices, controlled schedules, and handled internal decisions. The pattern suggested that the account was part of a wider shift in power, not an isolated mistake. One financial officer then admitted that several expenses had been divided into smaller transfers. The automatic review system, which flagged unusually large royal payments, had therefore remained silent. Camilla looked toward the second advisor. He lowered his eyes. Charles found an entry for a private anniversary gathering. He had attended that celebration, believing it had been personally funded. Now he saw that palace reserve money had covered the cost without his knowledge. The king pushed back his chair, crossed the room, and gripped the edge of a cabinet. Camilla softly said his name. He did not turn. "Tell me what I am about to hear," William asked, who had approved the payment structure. One advisor refused to answer, while the Queen watched him with growing fear. The truth would lead them back to a private royal dinner, where the first unmistakable breach of trust had begun. Every palace crisis has a moment that appears harmless, until the truth is finally known. In this story, that moment came during a private dinner at Highgrove. The guest list was restricted, the mood was controlled, and Camilla believed the evening had passed without incident. But one disputed invoice, one overheard instruction, and one missing signature turned that dinner into the trigger for everything that followed. Camilla's private account had not begun as a weapon. It started as a limited hospitality fund used for small personal engagements linked to her charitable and social duties. Highgrove, the king's private country residence, often hosted such gatherings away from formal palace routines. Over time, however, trusted members of her office expanded the fund, arguing that normal approval procedures were too slow and exposed private arrangements to unnecessary scrutiny. William first sensed the truth 6 weeks before the emergency meeting. During the dinner, he noticed Camilla's senior aide speaking quietly to a finance secretary near the corridor. The prince heard the instruction clearly. "Move it tonight, before the king sees the totals." Moments later, the secretary folded an invoice into his jacket. Their eyes met. The man immediately looked away. The future king followed him and demanded an explanation. The aide stepped between them and claimed the order came directly from Camilla. He warned William that pressing the issue would create a family war no one could control. The words were meant to frighten him into silence. Instead, they confirmed that the invoice carried more danger than its value alone could explain. Camilla entered the corridor before the argument ended. She accused William of interfering in matters beyond his current authority. The queen consort believed her household answered to her, and that he was using his position as heir to challenge her personal control. He answered without hesitation. Future responsibility, he said, gave him every reason to ask questions before the damage became permanent. The disputed expense was not for Highgrove, Clarence House, or any official royal property. Clarence House was the London residence used by Charles and Camilla for private and official work. The invoice covered a lavish refurbishment of rooms prepared for her relatives and close friends at a privately linked property. William requested the original record the next morning. Within 40 minutes, it disappeared from the internal system. That deletion changed everything. Mistakes could be explained. Erasure could not. Alone later that night, the prince studied a copied invoice and circled the hidden account code. A handwritten note appeared beneath the total. Charles must not be informed until the payment period closes. What began as a whispered order at Highgrove now returned to the emergency chamber, where William and Camilla would face each other with nowhere left to hide. The room changed when William stopped speaking to the officials and turned directly toward Camilla. Until that moment, the crisis had been trapped inside account numbers, coded transfers, and controlled language. Now it became personal. The future king pushed the financial record across the table, and demanded a direct answer. Camilla refused to touch it. Charles watched them both, knowing that whatever came next could never be withdrawn. William laid out the Highgrove invoice, the deleted digital record, and the internal note ordering staff to keep the expense outside Charles's quarterly briefing. A quarterly briefing was the formal review, where the monarch received a summary of major household spending every 3 months. The evidence was no longer scattered. It formed one clear chain. Camilla argued that the spending supported her official role. She said private guests needed protection, sensitive arrangements required discretion, and lower-level employees could not be trusted with every detail. The Queen Consort insisted that privacy was not deception. William rejected that defense. He accused her of using royal privacy as a shield for personal privilege. The prince said confidential work did not require false codes, deleted invoices, or hidden payments. She struck back immediately, accusing him of treating every decision she made as proof that she did not belong. Charles tried to stop the confrontation from exploding. He asked William to lower his voice. The king intended to restore order, but the request sounded like protection. His son stiffened. For years, he had watched difficult truths softened whenever Camilla stood at the center of them. This time, he would not allow it. The senior aide finally broke under pressure. In a documented statement given during the meeting, he admitted that Camilla had personally approved the creation of the spending channel. He claimed she had not examined every payment, but the admission destroyed her strongest defense. William then produced an audio recording captured in the Highgrove corridor. The room fell silent as the aide's voice filled the space. Her Majesty wants this settled before the king is briefed. Camilla's anger vanished. She understood that her own staff had left her exposed. The queen stared at the aide, but he would not meet her eyes. William stood and placed both hands on the table. "Look at me and deny that you knew." Camilla rose slowly. "I knew the account existed. I did not know what it had become." Charles set his pen down with unusual care. "Did you tell them to keep this from me?" The pause lasted only seconds, but it answered more than words could. The monarch ordered everyone except William and Camilla to leave. As the door closed, the argument stopped being about evidence. It became a battle over who still held the power to decide what happened next. Royal power rarely announces itself through shouting. It appears in smaller decisions: who remains in the room, whose papers are accepted, whose staff lose access, and whose signature suddenly stops carrying weight. After the confrontation, Charles faced a choice that would define his authority. He could protect Camilla from humiliation, or he could allow William to take control of an inquiry that might permanently reduce her influence. Charles knew the power to act belonged to him. As monarch, he could freeze the private account, dismiss household staff, and order a complete internal examination. An internal examination was a formal palace review, used to trace decisions, payments, and responsibility inside the royal household. Yet every option carried a personal cost. If he moved against Camilla, she would see it as abandonment, after years of standing beside him through scandal and rejection. William held a different kind of authority. He was the heir, the man expected to inherit the consequences of every weakness left behind. The prince warned that silence would create a dangerous rule. Closeness to the sovereign mattered more than accountability. Once that message entered the palace, no future reform could fully erase it. Camilla listened without interrupting. She had survived public hostility by trusting Charles to protect the life they had built together. Now the Queen Consort watched him weigh her pain against the institution itself. Her title remained untouched, but her confidence was already slipping. Princess Anne returned to the room carrying a prepared memorandum. The document recommended that every payment from Camilla's personal office required joint authorization until the inquiry ended. Joint authorization meant that 2 approved figures had to sign before money could be released, preventing one office from acting alone. Charles read the first page and realized William and Anne had discussed the proposal before the emergency meeting. The king felt the insult immediately. His own family had anticipated his reluctance to act. They had prepared for the possibility that love would make him hesitate. Anne did not retreat. She looked at her brother and spoke calmly. "This is not punishment. It is the moment you prove the rules reach everyone." Charles lowered his eyes because he knew she was right. The monarch lifted the pen and paused above the order. Then he signed. The private account was frozen, the senior aide was suspended, and financial control moved to an independent royal review team reporting jointly to Charles and William. Camilla watched the ink dry. Her husband had chosen institutional duty over private protection. She asked one final question. "Am I still permitted to keep my separate household office?" Charles did not answer. That silence reached further than any signed order. The account had lost its protection, but a colder punishment was beginning, as doors, privileges, and familiar loyalties started closing around Camilla. By the end of the meeting, the account had been frozen. By the end of the hour, Camilla's office had begun to change. Access cards stopped working. Staff received sealed instructions. Scheduled payments were suspended without warning. For years, she had survived hostility from outside the palace. Now the coldness was coming from within. And the deepest wound was not the loss of money. It was the sudden loss of trust. Financial officers moved quickly. They secured records, copied correspondence, and restricted every payment system connected to Camilla's office. Those systems controlled the flow of money for official engagements, staff costs, travel, and private arrangements. Once access was removed, her household could no longer act without outside approval. Camilla watched a security official remove the black access card from her desk and replace it with a temporary restricted pass. The new card allowed only limited entry to approved offices. She stared at it as though a public judgment had been reduced to a single piece of plastic. Her senior aide faced an even harsher consequence. He was escorted from the administrative wing, while junior staff were ordered not to delete messages, remove files, or contact him privately. The Queen Consort understood what that meant. The palace was no longer treating the matter as an error. It was treating it as a breach. William's new role made the humiliation worse. Every expense linked to Camilla's official engagements now required his temporary approval. The prince had not asked to control her daily work, but the signed order left no room for trust without proof. Camilla confronted Charles in private. She told him the arrangement placed her beneath his son and turned her position as queen into an empty title. The king did not soften his answer. William did not create this humiliation. Secrecy did. Investigators soon uncovered something darker. Payments had gone to consultants, who advised Camilla on expanding her ceremonial position and resisting future changes proposed by William. A ceremonial position meant the public duties, honors, and formal visibility attached to a royal role. One consultant received money only days before circulating a private strategy, designed to keep Catherine away from several major appearances. Charles cancelled the evening engagement he and Camilla were meant to attend together. He refused to present an image of unity, while the inquiry remained unresolved. She heard the decision from his private secretary, not from her husband. Camilla returned to her sitting room and called the suspended aide. A recorded message said the number had been disconnected. She lowered the telephone and sat without moving. Late that night, William received a private message from her. She asked to meet him alone the next morning, without Charles, Anne, or any advisor present. The palace had delivered its punishment. Now the emotional truth would emerge without witnesses or protection. There were no officials in the room, no financial experts, no king to interrupt, defend, or judge. Camilla sat across from William with a single handwritten page beside her. For the first time since the account was exposed, she did not speak as queen. She spoke as a woman who believed the royal family had never fully trusted her, and who had made a devastating mistake while trying to protect the position she feared losing. Camilla had asked for the private meeting because the official inquiry could trace payments, signatures, and deleted records, but it could not explain the fear behind them. She believed every request from her office had been treated with suspicion. Repeated delays made her feel powerless, and that resentment slowly became an excuse to create a separate fund. William listened without interrupting. The prince had agreed to meet because he needed to know whether she was accepting responsibility or simply trying to save her influence. He understood insecurity. He did not accept secrecy. The queen consort admitted that she authorized the account. She said it began as a way to avoid constant resistance from palace officials, not as a scheme to deceive Charles. But she also confessed that she stopped asking questions once the system began working in her favor. William answered calmly. Fear might explain the decision, he said, but it could not excuse hidden expenses or the use of royal money to strengthen a personal position. The future king reminded her that Charles had been excluded. His own approval code had been misused, and Catherine had been targeted by advisors paid through the same network. Camilla then pushed the handwritten page toward him. It listed transactions she believed had been inserted by the suspended aide without her full knowledge. Through that documented account, she offered to repay every personal expense from her own funds. Her next confession carried greater pain. She admitted approving the consultant who proposed limiting Catherine's appearances. The queen had feared the younger princess's popularity was making her irrelevant. What began as jealousy became strategy, and strategy became betrayal. William did not use the admission to destroy her. He offered a path forward: full repayment, public withdrawal from financial control, dismissal of the compromised advisors, and direct apologies to Charles and Catherine. Camilla's voice broke. "Do you believe I can ever be trusted again?" The prince held her gaze. "Trust is not restored by a title. It is restored by what you surrender." William slid the paper back. Camilla took the pen, paused, and signed the repayment commitment. Neither reached for the document when she finished. Their private agreement changed the direction of the crisis, but outside the palace walls, the story was already breaking into public view. The palace had planned a controlled statement. The country received an explosion. Before noon, broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Newspaper websites turned scarlet with breaking banners, and crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace. The private account was no longer a family secret. It had become a national argument about privilege, loyalty, and whether William had protected the crown or publicly humiliated the woman his father had spent years defending. Charles authorized the release after reading every line twice. The statement confirmed that a restricted financial account had been frozen, an internal review had begun, and Camilla would repay all expenses judged to be personal. An internal review was a formal investigation used to examine records, decisions, and responsibility inside the royal household. The wording was careful, but the meaning was brutal. William's role was also made clear. He had brought the account to the emergency meeting and forced the issue into the open. Supporters praised the prince for refusing to protect royal privilege. Critics accused him of weakening his father's marriage and using the scandal to increase his own authority before becoming king. Charles watched the television coverage in silence. Commentators called the confrontation the greatest internal challenge of his reign. The monarch did not answer them. He simply lowered the volume when one presenter asked whether his loyalty to Camilla had blinded him to what was happening inside her office. The story grew darker when a broadcaster displayed a leaked payment summary. The document listed private travel, luxury furnishings, paid advisors, and costs connected to the Highgrove dinner. The presenter lifted one page from the stack and looked directly into the camera. This is no longer a dispute over spending. It is a test of whether royal accountability is real. Camilla's surrender followed hours later. Through a written palace announcement, she confirmed that she had given up independent spending authority and dismissed every advisor connected to the hidden account. The queen consort remained silent in public, but the statement showed that her power had already been reduced. Outside Buckingham Palace, the reaction became impossible to contain. A crowd gathered beneath a newspaper billboard reading, William opens the Queen's secret books. One woman held a handwritten sign above her head. The crown must answer to the crown. Catherine found William alone after the statement was released. She placed her hand over his and told him that doing the necessary thing did not prevent it from hurting. The future king admitted that exposing the truth had protected the institution, but it had also wounded his father. The public had delivered its judgment in noise and headlines. Now Charles had to decide whether he could preserve his marriage without weakening the principle William had forced the monarchy to accept. The crisis ended not with exile, abdication, or a dramatic removal of title, but with something more painful, a permanent loss of private control. Charles gathered William, Camilla, Anne, and Catherine for one final meeting. This time, there were no hidden accounts left to expose, and no advisors left to blame. The question was simple. Could Camilla remain queen after breaking the family's trust? And what price would she accept to stay? Charles opened the completed review and read its conclusion aloud. The account had been improperly concealed and used for both official and personal expenses, although investigators could not prove that Camilla directly ordered every questionable payment. The review was the formal examination of records, decisions, and responsibility across the royal household. Its verdict ended every attempt to call the scandal a minor administrative mistake. Anne listened as the king confirmed that the suspended aid would be permanently dismissed. Every unapproved contract would be cancelled, and all royal offices would now operate under one unified financial oversight system. The princess understood why that mattered. No household, however close to the monarch, would ever again control hidden funds without outside review. Camilla accepted responsibility. She admitted that her desire for protection had created an office where secrecy became normal. The Queen apologized to Charles for excluding him, and to William for allowing his authorization code to be misused. Her words came through a signed statement she read directly to the family, leaving no doubt about the source of the confession. Catherine received the most personal apology. Camilla admitted that jealousy and fear had influenced her decision to fund advice designed to limit the younger princess's public role. She told her that popularity had made her feel threatened, and that insecurity had turned into betrayal. Catherine did not offer easy forgiveness, but she accepted the honesty. Charles then delivered the final decision. Camilla would remain queen, but she would permanently lose independent financial authority, repay every personal expense, reduce her private office, and submit all future spending to formal review. The king acknowledged that love had made him slow to recognize the danger. Protecting his wife, he said, could never mean protecting wrongdoing. William accepted the judgment. The prince had never sought revenge, removal, or humiliation. He wanted a rule strong enough to survive every future reign. Charles closed the report and placed it between them. No private household will ever again stand beyond the duty of the crown. Camilla nodded. William said nothing. Anne understood the decision was final. While Catherine watched the family accept a truth none of them could escape. The account was closed, the money was returned, and the monarchy moved forward under one clear rule. Loyalty could never stand above duty. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.